Some bikes get all the spotlight. They're the stars of a brand. Others, they just fade into the background. But why? Why has everyone stopped talking about the KTM 890 SMT? The initial hype around the 890 SMT was massive. After all, it had some pretty big shoes to fill, those of the 990 SMT. And at first, things looked good. In 2023, KTM released a video to announce the 890 SMT with a lot of fanfare. That video's racked up over 300,000 views by now. But after that, you could tell the buzz had died down a bit. Sure, the first test ride videos pulled in some solid views, but nothing like that initial peak. And all the follow-up content, kind of underwhelming in terms of views. Almost like the bike community just lost interest. And let's be honest, maybe no one's even going to watch this video either. Well, if you've actually clicked on this video, cheers, I appreciate it. And to be fair, it's a topic worth diving into because crossover bikes are a big deal in the motorcycling world. You see them everywhere. And that's exactly what the 890 SMT is all about. You can already tell from the name, supermoto touring. But then, why did interest in this bike drop off so quickly? I want to point out two reasons. First off, it's this lad here, the LC8C twin-cylinder engine. That's the one KTM had camshaft issues with. KTM did respond eventually, even if it was a bit late. Still, it's the first thing that comes to mind when people think of this engine. Now, to be clear, those problems came before the SMT. So the SMT itself never actually had those camshaft issues, but the reputation kind of stuck. And when you dig around online, you'll keep seeing people mentioning occasional problems with oil tightness on this engine. That said, who really knows how often that actually happened out of all the units sold? But still, trust in this engine remains pretty low. About as low, in fact, as the bank balance of the company in Mattighofen. The second issue might be the concept behind the bike. So, what are crossover bikes usually? A tourer powered by a naked bike engine, or a big adventure bike with a naked bike engine. But the SMT, it mixes something totally different, supermoto and touring. And that combo might have actually backfired. I mean, who's really looking for a supermoto tourer? And more importantly, is it even a proper supermoto? And when you've got supermoto in the name, you've got to prove that it actually lives up to it. That's exactly why I'm out here on this road. Exactly a year ago, I had the KTM 690 SMCR underneath me right here, one of the real supermotos of recent years. Now I want to find out how much supermoto is actually packed into the 890 SMT. And maybe some of you already spotted it. The bike we've got for this video, kindly provided by KTM Barcelona, has a weird tire mix, Michelin up front, Pirelli at the rear. So yeah, I'm not placing full trust in this mixed setup either. Plus, it's been raining heavily the past few days, so the road's still got a few wet patches here and there. Even so, it should be enough for me to get a feel for just how much supermoto is really in the 890 SMT. The riding position, classic KTM. You're sitting nice and far forward, right up by the handlebars, and the bars themselves reach back towards you. That gives you proper control over the front end, and it means you can guide the 890 SMT cleanly through corners. Thinking back to the 690, I've got to say, this twin-cylinder LC8C engine delivers way more power. It pulls smoothly from low revs and still has plenty left at the top end. Though, as you might have noticed from the display, I'm riding in street mode right now, not sport. Just because here on these tight twisties around Barcelona, the sport mode is a bit too aggressive for my liking. The throttle response is sharper and I prefer the smoother control that street mode offers in this kind of setting. But still, you can feel it. The 890 SMT wants corners. It just begs to be pushed into bends like a proper supermoto. And that pull from the LC8C, absolute dream. So, How much supermoto is really in the 890 SMT? Well, no, it's not a true supermoto. It's heavier than the 690 SMCR for sure, but at the same time it rides lighter and more playful than you'd expect just looking at the specs. KTM really nailed that balance. Still, a proper supermoto would cut through these bends even more effortlessly. So we've covered the supermoto side of things, but what about its touring abilities? After all, the SMT name doesn't just stand for supermoto, it's also got touring in there. That's where the 890 SMT tries to combine supermoto fun with long distance comfort. Now, for a deeper look into the touring side, I can definitely recommend the travel video by Scharf. He took this bike on a proper trip and made a super detailed video, so go check that out if you want the full breakdown. But as for my own time with the 890 SMT, I've had enough to form an opinion. And overall, it's a positive one, though not without a few caveats. The riding position is spot on, nice and upright, very comfortable ergonomics. At 175 meters tall, I've got no problem reaching the ground even when I come to a stop on gravel or uneven terrain. That makes the bike feel manageable. The weight isn't intimidating either. KTM really got that right. And in terms of seat comfort, for mid-range distances at least, the seat's perfectly fine for me. And when I'm just cruising along like this, yeah, I really enjoy that sharp KTM handling. It gives the bike a certain lightness through the bends, lets me ride relaxed but still dynamically through the corners. But hey, not everything that glitters is gold, right? There are two things in particular that stood out to me on longer rides with the 890 SMT, and they're not exactly new complaints. First off, there's this short windscreen in front of me. Now, when the bike's standing still, it looks great, gives off a sporty vibe, and I really like the look. But as soon as you get above 100 kilometers per hour, like on the motorway, you really start to notice it. The wind protection just isn't enough, at least not for what I'd expect from a touring bike. I mean, you can see I'm not tall, I'm 1.75, and even then the wind starts hitting me from the chest upwards. So yeah, wind protection just isn't quite what it should be for a tourer. Of course, you could fix that by mounting a taller screen, but the bike, as it comes from the dealer, with this low stock windscreen, it's just not quite enough for long distance touring, at least in my opinion. And since we're on the subject of motorway riding, another thing I noticed, and especially when cruising at steady speeds with slightly higher revs, is this: you get these subtle high frequency vibrations through the bars and foot pegs. They're not extreme, but over time they could definitely become annoying. Of course, everyone feels vibrations differently, so that's subjective, but it's something to watch out for. If you're taking a test ride, I'd really recommend hopping on the motorway too, not just sticking to twisty roads like this one. Of course, there's a ton more you could say about the KTM 890 SMT, but I'll point you towards a couple of other great sources. There's Pokey's test ride video from the launch event, and of course Scharf's travel video. You'll get all the info you need from those if you want to dive deeper. But for me, my ride with the 890 SMT comes to an end here. The KTM 890 SMT. Why has it become such a forgotten bike? It really is one of a kind in today's motorcycle world. There's nothing else out there that blends supermoto and touring like this. And maybe that's also its biggest problem. The people who are looking for something like this, they'll love it. It rides brilliantly, but it's definitely a niche product. And KTM just isn't the niche brand it used to be. So when there are other models in the range that appeal to a broader audience, it's no surprise that something like the 890 SMT ends up slipping through the cracks. But since I didn't understand why it's been forgotten, I researched a bit. And this is what its users say about it. The KTM 890 SMT is actually a great bike to ride. Most owners describe it as nimble, quick, and surprisingly stable at speed. It corners sharp, feels light, and has plenty of power without being overwhelming. Comfort-wise, it's got one of KTM's best stock seats, upright ergonomics and good balance, but the wind protection, pretty much non-existent without an aftermarket screen. That high front fender, not a fan favorite. A lot of riders think it looks awkward, and worse, it flings water and dirt right in your face. Many end up swapping it for a low fender just to stay clean. And while the SMT feels mechanically solid, some users feel KTM cut corners on parts like the switchgear and plastics. Not quite the premium finish you'd expect at that price. Now, about that price, a lot of people say it just costs too much for what it is. Some were waiting for discounts before even considering it. And with KTM already teasing Newer, bigger engines like the 990, potential buyers held off. Dealers got limited stock at launch, and while those units sold fast, interest dropped off quickly after that. It also sits in a weird niche, not quite an adventure bike, not quite a naked, not a full-on supermoto either. If you're purely on asphalt, the Duke makes more sense. If you want to tour, the Adventure does more. That left the SMT appealing to a very specific type of rider, and with that, it kind of faded into the background. So no, it's not a bad bike. In fact, riders who own it really enjoy it, but between the price, the timing, and the confused identity, it just never found its place. It's a real shame, actually, because right now, this bike's being seriously undervalued. You can get one for a pretty good price, and I reckon this is the kind of bike we'll look back on in 10 years and say, damn, we missed out on something special. It was a one-of-a-kind motorcycle. Proper shame that.